Some people don't lose their hearts, they just forget how to feel them. The room is too quiet for someone who used to run a billion-dollar empire, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest until even breathing feels like an interruption. And Ethan Cole sits by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse overlooking Manhattan, hands resting loosely at his sides, eyes fixed on the skyline, as if it's just another screen he forgot to turn off. The city lights flickering like signals he no longer understands, because 3 weeks ago, when the doctors said his body had healed, they didn't realize something else hadn't, something deeper, something no scan could measure. And now the man who once commanded boardrooms with a single glance can't even react when his own sister's voice trembles on the phone telling him she misses who he used to be, and he just listens, silent, not cold, not angry, just empty, like the space between two thoughts that never connect. And across the room, a glass of water sits untouched beside a stack of medical reports he never opened, because none of it matters when you can't feel the difference between loss and relief, between success and failure, between being alive and simply existing. And that's the moment Dr. Harris finally says it out loud in a voice low enough to sound like a confession. He's stable, but emotionally unresponsive, as if Ethan were a machine that rebooted without its core system. And the diagnosis travels quickly through the hospital staff, through the private care agencies, through every nurse and specialist offered the case and quietly turning it down. Because taking care of a man who feels nothing is harder than taking care of one in pain. Until it reaches Lily Brooks, who stands in a narrow hallway of a modest care facility miles away, reading the file with a stillness that feels different, her fingers pausing on his name like it carries a weight she recognizes. Her reflection faint in the polished surface of the clipboard, tired eyes, steady hands, a woman who has seen what happens when emotions disappear before a heartbeat does. And when the coordinator warns her, no one's lasted more than 2 days. Lily doesn't flinch, doesn't ask about the salary, doesn't ask about the hours, because something in the quiet description of Ethan Cole doesn't sound like a problem to fix. It sounds like a silence she's heard before. And later that night, when she steps into the elevator that climbs toward the top floor of a building most people only see in magazines, she reaches into her worn canvas bag and pulls out an old cassette player. The plastic slightly scratched, the label faded but still legible in careful handwriting, a small, ordinary object in a world of polished marble and glass. And as the doors slide open with a soft chime, revealing a hallway lit in soft gold that feels too perfect to be real, Lily exhales slowly, pressing the player gently into her palm like a promise, and whispers under her breath, not to anyone in particular, "You don't have to feel, not yet," before taking her first step toward the man who forgot how. The first thing Lily notices is not the view, not the marble floors, not even the silence that wraps around the penthouse like a second skin. It is him, sitting exactly where the file said he would be, near the window, unmoving, as if time had simply decided to pass around him instead of through him. And for a moment she does not speak. She just watches, because there is something unsettling about a man who does not react to anything. Not the distant hum of traffic 12 floors below, not the faint chime of the elevator doors closing behind her, not even the presence of a stranger stepping into his space. And when she finally takes a step forward, her shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor, she studies the small details the reports could not capture, the way his fingers rest slightly curled against his knee, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the absence of tension, of urgency, of anything that suggests he is connected to the world around him. "Ethan," she says, softly, testing the sound of his name in the room. But there is no response, not even a flicker in his gaze, and she does not seem surprised, only nodding to herself as if confirming something she already knew, before setting her bag down carefully on the low table beside him, unzipping it with deliberate calm, because rushing would feel wrong here, like speaking too loudly in a place meant for quiet truths. And as she pulls out the cassette player, her movements remain steady, almost ritualistic, the soft click of plastic against metal sounding louder than it should. And still, nothing changes in him. No curiosity, no irritation. Just the same distant stare toward a skyline that does not ask anything of him. "I am Lily," she continues, her voice even, not too warm, not too distant, just present. "I am going to be here for a while." and she pauses, not expecting an answer, only giving him space as if that alone might matter, then presses the play button, and a soft melody begins to fill the room. Something simple, something familiar, the kind of tune that does not demand attention but invites it, and for a few seconds, the sound seems almost out of place in the pristine stillness of the penthouse, like a memory drifting into a place that has forgotten how to hold on to it. Lily watches him closely, not for a dramatic reaction, not for anything obvious, just for the smallest shift, the kind most people would miss. And there it is, barely noticeable, the slightest pause in his breathing, as if his body recognized something before his mind could catch up, and she does not smile, does not react outwardly. She simply leans back in her chair, folding her hands in her lap, allowing the moment to exist without pressure, because forcing it would break it. "You do not have to talk," she says after a while, her voice softer now, almost blending with the music. "You do not have to explain anything. You can just sit here." Her eyes drift briefly to the city lights, then back to him. "I will do the talking for now." And she begins, not with questions, not with anything that demands a response, but with a story, something small, something ordinary about a rainy afternoon and a broken coffee machine. Her words simple, her tone steady, as if she is speaking to someone who has not disappeared but is simply waiting to be found again. And as the minutes pass, the room feels different, not louder, not brighter, but less empty, like the silence has shifted just enough to make space for something else, something fragile, something that does not yet have a name. And for the first time since she arrived, Lily allows herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he is still there. The next morning arrives quietly, the kind of soft gray light that slips through the glass without asking permission. And Lily is already there before the city fully wakes, standing in the kitchen area with a mug of coffee warming her hands, her eyes drifting occasionally toward the living room where Ethan remains in the same position, as if the night had passed without ever touching him. And she does not rush over this time, does not fill the silence immediately, because she has learned something in just a few hours, that presence matters more than pressure. And when she finally walks back into the room, she moves slower, more certain, like someone stepping into a rhythm instead of trying to create one. "Good morning, Ethan," she says, her voice calm, grounded, the kind of tone that does not expect anything in return, and she places the cassette player on the table again, pressing play without ceremony, letting the same melody return like a familiar thread weaving through the space. Because consistency, she knows, is how you reach someone who has lost their way. And as the music fills the room, she begins her routine, adjusting the curtains slightly to let in more light, straightening the untouched glass of water, small actions that seem insignificant but carry intention. And then she sits across from him, not too close, not too far, just within reach of a moment if it decides to appear. "I used to think silence meant peace," she says after a while, her gaze soft, but steady, "but sometimes it just means something is missing." Her fingers lightly trace the edge of the cassette player, a habit she does not seem aware of. "There was a time when I could not stand noise. I avoided it, turned everything off, thought if I stayed quiet long enough, the world would stop asking me to feel things I was not ready for." She pauses, not for effect, but because the memory sits heavier than the words. And for a brief second, her eyes shift, away from him, toward the window, toward something distant. But it did not work like that. She continues, quieter now. "The silence did not protect me. It just made everything inside louder." And she exhales slowly, grounding herself again before looking back at him, searching not for a response, but for recognition. And that is when it happens again, subtle, almost invisible. His fingers move, just slightly, not enough to be called a gesture, but enough to break the stillness he has been wrapped in. And Lily notices, of course she notices, but she does not react outwardly, does not rush forward or call attention to it. She simply lets it exist, because moments like this are fragile. They do not survive being chased, and instead she leans back slightly, giving the space room to breathe. "You do not have to understand it yet," she says gently, "just stay with it." The music continues to play, the same melody looping quietly, and for the first time, Ethan's gaze shifts, barely, but undeniably, away from the skyline and toward the sound, as if something in him is trying to remember what it feels like to notice, and Lily watches that tiny shift like it is everything. Because sometimes, the smallest movement is the loudest sign that someone is finding their way back. By the third day, the penthouse no longer feels like a place frozen in time. It feels like something waiting, something holding its breath between moments, and Lily moves through it with quiet familiarity, her routine unfolding not as a task, but as a rhythm she carries with her. The soft click of the cassette player, the low hum of music returning like a promise kept. The gentle adjustment of light as she opens the curtains just enough to let the morning settle in without overwhelming the space. And Ethan is still by the window, but not exactly the same, because now there is something different in the way he sits, something almost imperceptible, like a tension that was not there before, as if his body has begun to notice the weight of being present again, and Lily sees it the moment she steps into the room, not with surprise, but with quiet acknowledgement, the kind that does not demand progress but recognizes it when it arrives. "You moved yesterday," she says simply, her voice carrying no pressure, no expectation, just a statement offered into the air, and there is no answer, but she does not need one, because she is not speaking to the silence. She is speaking to the part of him that is beginning to return, and she sets her bag down, pulling out a small notebook this time, something new added to the routine. Something that does not disrupt but expands, and she flips it open, glancing down briefly before beginning to read. It says here you built your first company at 24. She continues, her tone light, almost conversational. That is impressive. Most people are still trying to figure out what they want at that age. Her eyes lift to him for just a second, searching not for recognition of the fact, but for connection to the idea. And again, there is nothing obvious. No reaction anyone else would notice, but she catches it, the faint tightening of his jaw, the smallest shift in his breathing, like the word built touched something buried beneath the surface, and she does not push further. She lets the moment pass, turning the page as if the story matters more than the response, because in a way, it does. "I never built anything like that," she admits after a pause, her voice softening. "But I used to fix things, small things, broken radios, old coffee machines, anything that made noise when it worked right." She smiles faintly to herself, not expecting him to see it. "I liked knowing that something could be quiet one moment and come back to life the next." And for the first time, there is a delay in his stillness, a hesitation, as if the words are reaching somewhere deeper than before, and Lily leans forward slightly, not closing the distance, but narrowing it just enough to feel the shift. "You are not broken," she says gently, not as reassurance, not as comfort, but as truth. "You are just paused." The music continues underneath. Her words, steady, familiar, and Ethan's gaze drifts again, this time not just toward the sound, but past it, toward her, not fully, not directly, but enough that the space between them changes, enough that the silence feels different, no longer empty, but filled with something fragile, something forming. And Lily does not smile, does not react. She simply sits there, present, patient, as if she knows that whatever is happening inside him does not need to be rushed, only witnessed. Because sometimes, coming back to life does not start with a heartbeat. It starts with a moment someone finally feels. On the fourth day, something changes in a way that cannot be measured by charts or reports. Something quieter, but far more significant. Because when Lily presses play on the cassette that morning, the music begins as it always does, soft and familiar. But this time, Ethan blinks, not once, not absent-mindedly, but slowly, deliberately, as if his body is responding before his mind has fully caught up. And Lily notices immediately, her eyes lifting from the small notebook in her lap, but she does not react. She simply watches, giving the moment space to exist without interruption, because she understands now that whatever is happening inside him is fragile, like something relearning how to move after being still for too long. And she sets the notebook aside, her hands resting loosely together. "That song," she says gently, her voice steady but softer than before. "It used to play in a diner I worked at years ago." Her gaze drifts briefly toward the window, then back to him. "Every morning at 6, same song, same order of customers, same routine. And I used to hate it." A faint smile touches her lips, not quite reaching her eyes. "I thought it meant I was stuck, that nothing in my life was changing." She exhales slowly, grounding herself in the present. But later, I realized it was not about being stuck. It was about having something that stayed when everything else did not. And there is a pause, not heavy, not empty, just full of something waiting, and for the first time since she arrived, Ethan's lips part slightly, the movement so small it could be missed if she were not paying attention. But she sees it, of course she does, and her breath stills for just a second, not out of shock, but out of respect for the moment, because this is not something to rush, not something to pull into the light too quickly. And then it happens, a sound, barely there, rough, uncertain, like a word that has forgotten how to exist. Why? The single syllable hangs in the air, fragile, incomplete, and Lily does not lean in, does not interrupt. She simply stays where she is, her voice meeting his at the same level, calm, patient. Why what? She asks softly, not pressing, just offering the space for him to continue if he can. And there is a long pause, his brow tightening slightly as if the effort itself is unfamiliar, as if forming a thought and giving it sound requires more than he remembers. And then again, quieter this time. Why this? His eyes shift, not fully meeting hers, but no longer fixed on the skyline either, somewhere in between, searching, and Lily understands the question is not about the music, not really. It is about everything, about why she is here, why she keeps speaking, why she does not walk away like the others, and she leans back just slightly, her expression softening, not with pity, but with something steadier, something grounded. Because someone stayed for me once, she answers simply, her voice carrying no drama, no weight beyond the truth itself. When I could not feel anything either, the words settle between them, quiet but undeniable, and for a moment, neither of them moves, the music continuing softly in the background, wrapping around the space like a thread pulling something back together, and Ethan's hand shifts again, this time more clearly, his fingers curling slightly against his palm, not by accident, not by reflex, but with intention, and Lily watches without reacting, without claiming the moment, because she knows this is not about her. It is about him finding something that was never truly gone, just buried beneath silence. And for the first time, the distance between them does not feel like a barrier. It feels like something slowly closing. That night feels different in a way Lily cannot explain, not because anything dramatic happens, but because the silence between them is no longer empty. It carries something now, something fragile but growing, and Ethan does not return to staring out at the skyline for hours like before. Instead, his gaze lingers somewhere closer, somewhere inside the room, as if the world beyond the glass has lost its grip on him. And when Lily presses play on the cassette again, the melody fills the space with a familiarity that now feels almost intentional, like a thread tying each moment together. And she notices the way his shoulders shift slightly, not tense, not relaxed, just aware. Aware in a way he was not days ago. And she takes a seat across from him, closer this time, not enough to invade his space, but enough to make the distance feel different. It is strange, right? She says quietly, her voice soft but steady. How something simple can stay with you longer than everything else. Her fingers rest lightly against the cassette player, grounding herself in the present as much as offering him something to hold on to. And Ethan's eyes move again, this time more clearly, settling somewhere near her, not quite meeting her gaze but no longer avoiding it either. And for a moment, neither of them speaks, the silence stretching but not breaking, until his voice returns, still rough, still unfamiliar, but stronger than before. You said you could not feel. The words come slowly, like each one has to be found before it can be spoken, and Lily nods, her expression unchanged, not surprised, not overwhelmed, just present. I could not, she answers honestly, not after everything stopped making sense. She pauses, letting the words settle before continuing. I thought if I shut everything down, it would hurt less. Her eyes flicker briefly, not away from him, but inward, touching a memory she does not fully reveal. But it did not work like that, she adds quietly. It just made everything distant. And Ethan's brow tightens slightly, as if the word resonates in a way he recognizes, and his hand moves again, more deliberate this time, fingers pressing lightly against his palm as if testing the feeling, as if checking whether something is there. And Lily watches, not interrupting, not guiding, just allowing, because she knows this is not something she can give him, only something she can help him find. Does it come back? He asks after a long pause, his voice lower now, almost uncertain, and the question lingers between them, heavier than anything he has said before, and Lily does not answer immediately, not because she does not know, but because the truth matters more than comfort. Not all at once, she says finally, her tone gentle but firm. It comes back in pieces. She leans back slightly, giving the moment space, sometimes in ways you do not expect, and for a second, Ethan's gaze lifts, meeting hers just enough for something to pass. Between them, something unspoken but undeniable, and then it fades again, not completely, just enough to remind them both that this is still a process, still unfinished, but no longer impossible. And Lily lets out a quiet breath she did not realize she was holding, her hands resting still in her lap. As the music continues to play, steady and patient, like everything else in this room, like her, like him, like the feeling slowly finding its way back. The next afternoon begins with a quiet tension that lingers beneath the surface, something neither of them names, but both of them feel, and Lily notices it the moment she steps into the room. The way Ethan is no longer sitting exactly where she left him, his chair turned slightly, angled toward the center of the room instead of the window, a small shift, but one that speaks louder than anything else he has done so far. And she pauses for just a second, taking it in without reacting, because she understands now that every change matters, even the ones that seem almost invisible, and she moves forward slowly, setting her bag down with the same calm rhythm she has carried since the beginning, pressing play on the cassette as the familiar melody fills the space again. But this time, it does not feel like she is introducing it. It feels like the room is expecting it, like something in him is waiting for it, and she takes her seat, closer again, just enough that the space between them feels intentional rather than accidental. You moved, she says softly, not as a question, not as praise, just a quiet acknowledgement. And for a moment, there is silence, the kind that no longer feels empty, until Ethan's voice breaks through it. Steadier now, still low, but no longer fragile. I did not want to look out there anymore, he says, his eyes not quite meeting hers but no longer avoiding her either, and the words settle between them, simple but heavy with meaning, and Lily nods slowly, her expression unchanged, but something in her posture softens, because this is not just progress, this is choice. What do you want to look at instead? She asks gently, giving him space to decide, and there is a pause, longer this time, his gaze drifting, searching, as if the answer is not something he has practiced yet. And then, quietly, almost uncertain, here, he says, and it is not a complete sentence, not a full explanation, but it is enough, more than enough. And Lily does not smile, does not react in a way that might make the moment feel fragile. She simply accepts it, letting it exist without pressure. That is a good place to start, she replies, her voice steady. And for a while, they sit like that, the music playing softly, the city humming in the distance, the silence no longer something to fill, but something to share, until Ethan speaks again, this time with a slight hesitation, as if he is stepping into something unfamiliar. Before this, he begins, his brow tightening slightly. I remember things, meetings, numbers, decisions, but I do not remember why they mattered. His hand shifts again, fingers curling slightly as if grounding himself in the present. It all feels empty, and Lily listens, without interrupting, her attention fully on him, not searching for answers, not trying to fix what he is saying, just holding the space for it. Maybe it felt full because you were always moving, she offers after a moment, her tone thoughtful but not certain. And when everything stopped, there was nothing left to distract you from what was missing. The words are not meant to solve anything, just to reflect something back to him. And Ethan exhales slowly, the sound almost unfamiliar, like something he has not done in a long time. And for a second, his eyes meet hers more directly than before, not fully, not completely, but enough to carry something deeper, something closer to understanding. And then, quietly, he asks, what if it does not come back? The question hangs there, not dramatic, not desperate, just honest. And Lily does not answer right away, because she knows this moment matters, not for what she says, but for how she says it. And when she finally speaks, her voice is calm, steady, grounded in something real. "Then we find something new," she says simply, her gaze steady on his. "Something that matters now." And the room settles around them again, the music continuing its quiet loop, the city moving on outside. But inside, something has shifted once more, something deeper than before, because for the first time, Ethan is not just remembering what he lost. He is starting to consider what he could still have. That evening does not arrive gently. It carries a weight that settles into the room before either of them fully understands why. And Lily feels it the moment she steps out onto the small balcony just off the living area, a place she has not used before, the city stretching endlessly below, lights flickering like distant signals. And for the first time since she arrived, she needs a moment alone, her hands resting on the cool metal railing as she exhales slowly, grounding herself in the quiet. Because something has shifted too quickly, something she did not expect to feel. And inside, Ethan remains seated, but not still, not the way he used to be. His gaze no longer fixed, his posture no longer detached. Instead, there is a tension in him now, a restlessness that did not exist before, as if feeling, even in fragments, has begun to demand something he does not yet know how to give. And when Lily steps back inside, she pauses at the doorway, watching him for just a second longer than usual, because this version of him is unfamiliar in a different way, not empty, but unsettled. And she walks in quietly, setting her bag down without the usual rhythm, her movements slower, more deliberate. And when she reaches for the cassette player, her hand lingers there, just for a moment, before she presses play, the melody returning. But this time it feels different, not like comfort, not like routine, but like something that is about to break. And Ethan reacts almost immediately, his hand tightening against the arm of the chair, his breathing shifting, shallow, uneven. And Lily notices, of course she notices, but instead of moving toward him, she steps back slightly, giving him space, because this is not something to control, it is something to let happen. And he speaks before she does, his voice rough, strained in a way it has not been before. "Stop." The word comes out sharper than anything he has said, not loud, but clear, and Lily freezes. For a second, her hand hovering over the player before she turns it off, the silence rushing back in. Heavier now, thicker, and she looks at him, not startled, not afraid, just attentive, waiting. And Ethan exhales, a shaky sound that feels unfamiliar even to him, his fingers pressing into his palm as if trying to hold onto something slipping through. "It is too much," he says after a moment, his voice quieter now, but still tense. "I remember something, but I cannot hold it." His brow tightens, frustration flickering across his expression for the first time, real and undeniable. And Lily does not move closer, does not reach for him. She simply stays where she is, steady, grounded. "That means it is working," she says softly, her voice calm but firm. And he shakes his head slightly, the movement small but filled with resistance. "No," he replies, his gaze dropping. "It feels like losing it all over again." And the words land heavier than anything else he has said, because now, it is not just absence, it is awareness of absence. And Lily feels it too, the shift, the weight of it. And for a moment, she says nothing, because there is no easy answer here, no gentle reassurance that would not sound empty. And instead, she steps closer, just one step, enough to shorten the distance without closing it completely. "Feeling it again does not mean you are losing it," she says quietly, her eyes steady on him. "It means it was always there." And Ethan looks up, not fully, but enough, his expression caught somewhere between frustration and something deeper, something closer to fear. And for a second, the room holds that tension, the silence no longer peaceful, but alive, shifting. And then Lily does something she has not done before. She reaches into her bag and pulls out the cassette, holding it in her hand instead of placing it back into the player. "You do not have to go through this with the music," she adds gently, "but you do have to go through it." And she sets the cassette down on the table, not as a solution, but as a choice, and steps back again, giving him the space to decide. And for the first time since everything began, Ethan is not just responding, he is struggling, not with emptiness, but with the return of something real, something difficult, something that does not disappear when ignored. And as the silence settles again, it is no longer something to escape. It is something to face, and Lily stands there, steady, present, knowing that this moment, uncomfortable and uncertain, is the one that matters most. The silence after his words does not feel heavy anymore. It feels necessary, like the air before something changes, and Lily does not move, does not rush to fill it, because she understands now that this moment does not belong to her. It belongs to him. And Ethan sits there, his hand still resting against his palm, his breathing uneven but steady enough to hold him in place. And for a long time, neither of them speaks. The city outside continuing its quiet rhythm, distant and irrelevant, until, slowly, almost cautiously, Ethan reaches forward, his fingers hovering over the cassette on the table, not touching it at first, just staying there, as if the decision itself carries weight, and Lily watches without reacting, her presence steady, her expression unchanged, giving him the space to choose, and then finally, his fingers close around it, lifting it slightly, the movement small but deliberate, and he looks at it, really looks at it this time, not as an object, but as something connected to everything he has been feeling, everything he has been avoiding. And when he speaks, his voice is quieter than before, but clearer, more certain. "I want to remember," he says, not as a question, not as a fear, but as a decision, and Lily exhales softly, the sound almost imperceptible, her hands remaining still in her lap, because she knows this is the moment, the turning point that cannot be forced, only accepted, and she nods once, slow and steady. "Then do not run from it," she replies gently, her voice calm but grounded in something stronger than reassurance. And Ethan lowers his gaze to the cassette again before placing it back into the player himself, his movements careful, almost unfamiliar, as if each action is being relearned. And when he presses play, the melody returns, filling the room once more, but this time it does not overwhelm him. It settles around him, something he steps into instead of something that pulls him under, and his eyes close for just a second, not in retreat, but in focus, in effort. And Lily watches as his expression shifts, not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to show that something inside him is connecting, threads pulling together where there was once only distance. And when he opens his eyes again, they are not empty, not distant. There is something there now, something real, something present. And he looks at her, fully this time, not searching, not hesitant, just seeing. And the space between them feels different, not smaller, but clearer, like something unspoken has finally been understood. "It hurts," he admits quietly, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. And Lily does not look away, does not soften the truth, she simply nods. "It is supposed to," she answers, her tone gentle but certain, and for a moment, they sit there in that shared understanding, the music continuing softly in the background, until Ethan speaks again, his voice no longer uncertain, no longer searching, but grounded in something new. "Stay," he says, a single word, simple but filled with everything he has not said before, and Lily holds his gaze for a second longer, not surprised, not overwhelmed, just present, and then she nods again.